Good afternoon. I'm Kelley Cordeiro.
Hello, everyone. I'm Erica Flores, and we are both resource specialists with NYSED's Long Island-RBERN, which is the Regional Bilingual Education Resource Network. And Kelley and I will be co-hosting today's session on Bitmoji classrooms, bringing remote learning to life. So at this time, we would like to ask everyone to please sign into the chat with your first and last name, your position, and your district to verify your attendance.
And while you're doing that, we would also like to share some information about how to access Long Island-RBERN resources. First, if you haven't already, we invite you to visit our website, join our listserv, and then you will receive notifications about upcoming events that we're offering, any professional development, any regulatory updates. You'll receive all of that information. And also be sure to follow us on Twitter, where we share a lot of resources and where you can just check out who we're following so that you can get an idea of who you should follow on Twitter to build your virtual professional learning community.
We're also excited to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find our growing library of recordings of past webinars and instructional snapshots.
So again, if you haven't already, I'm going to ask that everyone please mute themselves just to cut down on some of the background noise. And you can simply use the chat feature or the raise your hand feature on Zoom when you wish to contribute. If you have a question, a comment about anything, an experience you'd like to share.
Okay, so our objectives for today's session are to talk about some of the whys behind Bitmoji, specifically as they support the linguistic and academic needs for our English language learners. While we will share a few tips on how to, our focus is to really highlight the meaningful ways to integrate Bitmoji classrooms into our instructional delivery models by looking at the benefits of a well-crafted Bitmoji classroom.
So we'd like to welcome you to our Bitmoji classroom. As you'll notice, we've created this space to reflect aspects of our professional and our individual backgrounds. For example, we used it to visually organize some commonly used resources through hyperlinked images, as you can see here. We have our Long Island-RBERN website. All of the images here are hyperlinked, and we just wanted to demonstrate that for you. So here's our Long Island-RBERN website linked. And we also have links to NYSED, to the Office of Bilingual Education of World Languages, to the CRSE framework, various presentations and supporting resources, my learning plan, different things that we access on a regular basis. But we also wanted to include some personal references, such as the flags, which represent our cultural backgrounds. So we included some of these flags to represent who we are. We have our dogs with us, Kenzie and Teddy. They are with us in our Bitmoji classroom. And we even have something as simple as a Starbucks coffee cup, which gets us through the day. And it just brings an element of personalization to our space. This is definitely cute and fun, but as with many digital platforms and tools, Bitmoji has as many fans as it does naysayers, some of who perceive it to be just a gimmicky, flashy, cutesy platform without really recognizing that it also has the potential to add value or meaning to instruction when with intention. So as Erica and I started our exploration of Bitmoji Classroom, we approached it with this critical lens, looking for ways it could enhance virtual instruction. And that's what we want to share with you today.
So with this in mind, we categorized our findings into 3 different buckets. So we have identity, independence, and interaction. What we have called the 3 I's of integrating face-to-face and remote instruction. And we're going to delve into each of these areas with you today.
So let's start with the concept of identity. As you can see at the head of the slide, we've included a one-liner to capture the gist of this category. We also wanted to share some authentic voices from the field of education. So up at the top, you see the one-liner, allowing students to choose aspects of their identity which they choose and wish to have represent them. And we have a quote here from educator Whitney Aragaki on her experience with Bitmoji Classroom. And Whitney says, "I will not apologize for my Bitmoji Classroom at all. As someone who grew up with American Girl dolls that didn't look like me, with zero familiar Barbies, and only a Mulan avatar as a minor resemblance, I will take all the time I want with representation in my digital classroom." So as you can see, or as you can hear from that quote too, Bitmoji Classroom allows students and teachers to choose aspects of their identity that they wish to represent, as well as to cultivate a culturally responsive and sustaining learning environment.
Okay, so we just want to survey, all of the participants here today to get a feel for your personal experience using Bitmoji. So Kelley has just launched a poll. Thank you, Kelley. And our question is, have you created a Bitmoji avatar? And you'll also notice that there is a follow-up question there, which is just, embedded in the poll, but we're asking that you respond in the chat. So if you have created a personal Bitmoji avatar, have you incorporated it into your digital classroom? So that's just the follow-up, if you can respond to that in the chat.
So I see currently we have 35 participants with us, and as of now, 28 people have responded to the poll. 18 are indicating, yes, I have a personal Bitmoji avatar, and 11 are saying, no, I'm just now exploring Bitmoji. So let's take a look in the chat and see if anybody is sharing any additional information.
So I'm seeing, Kelley, in the chat that some of us have the avatars, and maybe they might have just included that once or twice. But no real depth yet into their experience using Bitmoji in the classroom.
Okay, here you can see I'm sharing the results of the poll, which if you are a Zoom user is a great feature for you to incorporate. I'm going to close that out now and stop sharing the poll. And any more chat comments, or are we ready to move on? Let me just take a look at the chat.
So I'm seeing also using it for signs on the doors.
Okay.
Lauren says it's so engaging for the kids. So I'm seeing that, we have some people who are starting to delve into this whole Bitmoji classroom.
Great. Great. So we have a mix of users. But for those of you who are new to Bitmoji Classroom, we will be sharing resources at the end of today's presentation, including this tutorial featured on this slide for getting started in creating your own Bitmoji classroom. So in preparing for today's session, Eric and I gathered resources, templates, and activities that we've compiled into this comprehensive resource document to share with you. So if you see something that you like during today's presentation, be rest assured we will be sharing it with you. But we watched this tutorial when we were getting started, and here's what Erica and I thought after watching it.
Sounds easy. Even the kids could do it.
So these Bitmoji, the talking Bitmojis, were created by using the iFunface app, which is free and easy to use. And it adds another layer of interaction to your classroom. If you notice, the Bitmoji voices were created using a voice effect inside of that app, which disguises the speaker's actual voices. And this feature may be really great for some of our students who may still lack that confidence in their oral language production. So, in turn, it lowers that effective filter for them. So after we did, the initial activity of, or after you do the initial activity of having your students create their Bitmojis, where might you go from here? So this is a follow-up activity for students to express their identities and to build your virtual classroom community. So this is really just like a new spin on a very popular All About Me project.
And here we have another way, another suggestion for a community building activity that you can bring into your Bitmoji classroom. And it's creating a classroom photo where, you know, using those Bitmoji avatars that are created by your students, or if you're assisting them in creating them, you can then gather them into this group photo. And with the year we're having, for some of us, this may be the only opportunity that we have for a class photo. So it's great to have that representation of all of the members of your learning community. And right now we're showing you a blank slide, which is the template for creating that class photo. So here's where you can add students, or students can add themselves as you are building this classroom together after you've all created your Bitmojis. So right now we're going to just launch another poll because we'd like to hear from you. And the question is, thinking about identity, how else might you personalize your Bitmoji classroom to reflect both you and your students in your learning community? And we're going to ask that for this question, that you please respond in the chat, or you can, if you feel comfortable, you can unmute yourself and perhaps share something that you've done, or just an idea about how you can bring that element of personalization and identity into the classroom using Bitmojis.
Okay, so while we're waiting for some more responses in the chat, I just wanted to highlight that Bitmoji you might see there of myself. It's a dynamic visual representation, which again highlights the versatility of the features of Bitmoji. And you know, this was done using the Snapchat app, and then taking that video from Snapchat and removing the background with the unscreen website.
And as you may notice, the adjective we're going to be using a lot as we are sharing these resources is free. Everything that we have used has been a free version. There may be subscription versions available that may have more features, but everything that we have done, that we've incorporated in today's presentation, was done from free versions.
Right. So I'm looking in the chat, Kelley, and I see teachers mentioning that they've, you know, changed their Bitmoji outfits to represent things like BLM and LGBTQ+, to be very inclusive of their students. I've also seen incorporating bilingual posters, you know, having the flags similar to our, you know, version of our classroom or our office space. So, you know, we're seeing that some of you are already diving in.
That's awesome. I love that. That's great.
All right. So we would like to also, you know, recognize how Bitmoji Classroom promotes student independence. And in a recent podcast, Ronald Catlin shared his observations on how student independence is cultivated by Bitmoji Classroom. And so he said that once you teach students how to interact with your virtual classroom, students can navigate independently and spend more time on their learning because they have a consistent, visually engaging place to define their own learning experience.
So this really creates a sense of just familiarity and connection in a virtual space, something that in our discussions with teachers across Long Island, we're hearing that many teachers are still struggling to figure this out right now. So the virtual space can be designed to feel a little more like a homey classroom, utilizing different icons and sections as handy visual space organizers.
Right. So another example we have here is, you know, just to think about the type of resources that you may make available for independent student exploration, scaffolding, and enrichment within a math classroom, such as this one, or a science classroom. We want to point out that the images that we have here of myself and Kelley, these were created using the camera app, which is, you know, you can have on any mobile device, and then removing the background with the Remove BG website. So we know that equity issues concerning access to Wi-Fi and devices have been the reality for many of our students during remote instruction. And so this is just one way to address these potential issues of inclusivity by creating other ways for students to represent themselves.
We also wanted to include this language classroom. And this is an example from Esther Park, who is a rock star in her field. And you can follow Esther on Twitter at Mrs. Park Shine. You'll actually see on the shelf, on the top shelf of the bookcase, there's a little screenshot of her Twitter page there. And you can also attend Esther's Bitmoji session at the upcoming NICE TESOL conference on November 14th, where Erica and I will also be presenting a Bitmoji classroom session on November 13th. So a great opportunity to interact with so many great educators in the field of English as a new language, and you know, just get so many different opportunities to network with and learn from the expertise of others and just the creativity that's going on during this time. So taking a look at Mrs. Park's classroom, at first glance, you'll see that Esther replicated her physical classroom with her I can statements on the board, with her pocket chart, with some posters displaying class engagement expectations and positive affirmations. But we also wanted to point out, as we had demonstrated earlier, that many of the objects included in Mrs. Park's classroom are linked directly to apps such as Kahoot, Quizlet, Edpuzzle, Duolingo, Class Dojo, and Pear Deck, just to name a few on her shelf here. There are also book images linked to read alouds and other resources that students can access independently to further their own learning and engagement.
Right. So one Bitmoji educator observed that you don't just make a Bitmoji classroom and say, okay, here you go. You're in there with them. You're helping them to find and use things in the room and working with them on assignments.
Another educator shared that our Bitmoji classroom serves as a home base for our class. Students can access it at any time, and they can click around to various spaces to see what we're working on, to see our calendar, and any learning resources that are made available. Similarly, parents can log on to see what students are learning and to familiarize themselves with the resources and tools that their children will be using. So students can pop into the Bitmoji classroom if they're early for a Zoom call or for your virtual class time, or if they want to read a book or work independently on their online learning. So right now I'm going to launch another poll. It should be coming up shortly.
Okay, I see it there, Kelley.
Okay, thank you. And our question here is, thinking about designing your classroom with intentionality for your English learners, thinking about your students, what other meaningful resources and tools might you include to support instruction? So again, we're going to ask that you please enter your responses in the chat now. Again, you know, a Bitmoji classroom needs to evolve with the learners in the room. So it should be reflective of what you're going to be using, what you have expectations that your students will be using. So please share with us any thoughts you have about other meaningful resources you might include in your Bitmoji classroom.
So Kelley, I'm looking in the chat and I see word walls, which would be very helpful for our English language learners. So there's actually 2 teachers who shared that idea of doing word walls. I also see lots of hyperlinks of other educational videos, another tool like Flipgrid, I'm seeing
See
anchor
school,
charts.
yeah, school's website, vocabulary with pictures, IPA chart with link to pronunciation. Great, great ideas. Virtual
Graphic
class
organizing.
trip.
Yeah, I saw that virtual class trip, and I think that's a
Mhm.
great idea to be able to do some type of intervisitation, right? You can't really walk into
Yes.
all of these different classrooms right now, but being able to see their virtual classrooms can be still just as exciting.
Mhm. And so often a big chunk of August and September, teachers are spending time really creating a warm, inviting space for their learners. And again, for many of us this year, that was lacking a little bit. So this is a space where you can try to recreate that space. I see Kelley saying use of school mascot pictures, recreation of the plants and art in her classroom. So again, trying to replicate your physical classroom where students might not be spending as much time in your virtual space. So great ideas.
Right. So
Thank you
Mrs.
all
Park
for contributing
also
to that.
shares many of her slides and resources free of charge to other educators. This is a weekly scheduler. And again, it really cultivates time management skills as an executive function, fostering independent learners who can set up their own pace and manage completion of their tasks and use of resources. So she clearly communicates her virtual office hours over here for her students. And that's for any student who is independently seeking extra help or check-ins.
So as we've seen so far, Bitmojis can be helpful and a fun way to get students to remember the rules and the expectations, both in and out of their virtual classrooms. And on this slide, we see that Brandy's poster here, it focuses on adhering to protective measures and expectations, which have become the new reality for our students in our hybrid spaces. But think about other ways you can use this. This is simply modeling one way to foster independence among our students. So she used it for, what a current concern is, things that she wanted to remind students about, to foster their independence in understanding the expectations and living up to those expectations as far as safety and protective measures. But think about other ways too that, we might use Bitmoji classrooms and visuals that we create there to foster independence.
So virtual classroom libraries also afford student choices for independent reading selections. The books on the shelves of this beautiful Bitmoji diversity library, which was created by Tracy Burton. You'll see that here at the bottom. Each of these books are hyperlinked to a safe youtube.net. Recently, this has been changed to video.link. But here, these are recordings of read alouds, and video.link pre-screens digital content, and it allows for educators to safely share links to videos from other sources such as YouTube or Vimeo, knowing that it won't lead to any inappropriate content, such as, any of the ads that pop up, or oftentimes it flows from one video to the next. Using video.link can, avoid all of that.
So Eric and I actually spent a little time playing around with that because we just thought it was such a tremendous resource. And you can pretty much take the link, copy and paste a link from any YouTube video or Vimeo video, and create a unique link using the video link website, where it just filters it out for you. As Erica said, it pre-screens it, it filters out to create pure appropriate content that you can then share. So it really, really a great resource to use.
Yeah, so I'm seeing questions in the chat regarding video.link. So I just wrote it there for you. But again, as we stated earlier, at the end of the session, we're going to share all of these resources with you guys.
Mhm.
I mean, we compiled everything and just kind of put it in one easy to share document for you. All of these slides are there, including the links. So
With
yeah,
lots of visuals, so
yeah.
you'll be able to identify. We scaffolded it for you.
Right, pretty much. So, that will all be shared with you at the end of the session. And so I'm seeing that Safe YouTube was hacked recently, but it doesn't exist anymore, right? So now
Okay.
video.link. These are still linked to that Safe YouTube, but it's
Mhm.
changed their whole entire website is no longer running.
Yes. So the links to Safety YouTube, while you can still access these books that are included in this diversity library, they will eventually be phased out as they make that complete transition to video link. And that transition is also enabling them to support more platforms and more sources within their site.
Right.
So yeah, that will be on the resource document that we're going to share with you. So coming back, we know that during this time of remote learning that we're all still in the midst of, feelings of isolation and depression have been commonly reported, among our students, among teachers, among so many people really in every walk of life. But we've seen a tremendous increase in the need to support the social emotional needs of our students. So Bitmoji Classroom can support this. We can house resources here which support students in identifying and regulating their emotions and behaviors and provide strategies to enable students to become self-regulated, independent learners. So these strategies apply to our students, again, attending remotely or face-to-face. So this particular resource that you see on this slide is linked to a student survey using Google Forms to create a daily check-in where students can reflect on and complete a self-assessment of their current emotional status. And it then encourages them to self-select a strategy to regulate their emotions. The Bitmoji images on these resources provide scaffolding for our English learners in the form of visual cues. And you may also choose to include a translated version of this resource for your learners in your classroom. So we really like this. We're going to actually just invite you now in the chat to share some of the ways that you have addressed social emotional needs of your students. We know that there's been tremendous effort throughout all our districts. The teachers we're talking to, just making phone calls, emails, just reaching out and trying to connect with students. So please think about some of the ways that you've addressed social emotional needs of your students, how this might be supported through a Bitmoji classroom. And again, you can share something in the chat, or you can, if you're comfortable, unmute yourself and share it with us verbally. I'm just going to take a look in the chat now to see if anything's coming in. And you may have questions, you may have just observations, anything that you'd like to share.
So Kelley, I do see journaling being something that teachers are doing, having an SEL focused virtual library.
Awesome.
We
That's
would
great.
love to see that. That sounds great. I see using Jamboard, which is another great tool from the Google Suite to post SEL topics, and a check out, right? So we discussed here how this link would check in, but giving
Great.
that opportunity also to check out to see if their mood has changed at all, what might have caused a mood shift,
I
whether
love
it's
that.
positive or negative. I think that checkout, it can also be crucial should you have, the time to incorporate during your class time with your students.
Laura makes a great comment here that you may think is, you might just take this for granted, but taking the time to get to know your students and help them learn the program. We have to just sometimes slow things down and just start with that simple step of getting to know our students, taking the time to get to know your students. How else can you identify their needs and identify how you can best support them, whether it's in a social emotional capacity, academic, linguistic, whatever way you're providing support, knowing them is really critical to that process.
Right. There's still so many more comments coming into the chat on how teachers have been addressing SEL. But another, I think, crucial observation here is connecting with the parents also.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So again, I think that goes
Absolutely.
back to Kelley's comment of getting to know your students and taking that step back. Well, that also includes connecting with their parents to better get to know, to better know what their home life is like.
Mm-hmm.
So these suggestions are really fantastic. And we thank everybody for adding to the chat.
It really is just so reflective of the tremendous commitment that, we always see in our teachers, but I think our teachers have really gone above and beyond within these last several months.
Yes, I agree, Kelley.
During this time.
I totally agree. We've come to our final I here, which is this interaction. And really we just kind of want to examine the nature and purpose of interaction as facilitated through the Bitmoji classroom. Educator April Alick shared how Bitmoji Classroom has influenced interaction with her students. And so she says here that I've had to rethink how I teach and how to deliver content to my grade 8s. By making my virtual classrooms more interactive, student engagement increased, she said. With distance learning, you're not there to give a gentle tap on the desk as a reminder to stay focused. She said at the end of each task, I was able to include a Bitmoji of myself, telling students, stop, go back, you are done, or awesome work today. And it gave students immediate feedback and motivation.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes students can feel very alone in the virtual space. So having that interaction in that way is really so important. So let's quickly take a look at some examples of how Bitmoji Classroom supports interactions within these hybrid learning spaces, and think about creative ways to connect our virtual spaces to what's happening in our face-to-face classrooms. As we know, a lot of times these are happening simultaneously. You've got students in your classroom in front of you, and you've also got your virtual learners logging in to your face-to-face instructional time. So there's a lot going on. So how are we creating these opportunities for interaction and supporting these opportunities for interaction? So again, we're able to use these spaces for whole group or small group interactions, where we can include environmental text, providing linguistic scaffolds, such as accountable talk sentence frames, to facilitate small group discussion. And just like in our face-to-face setting, your virtual Bitmoji classroom should, again, evolve to reflect the learners in your room. It's not going to be the same across the board from one class to the next. It may look very different depending on who the learners are in the room. It should be reflective of the learning and the learners who are occupying that space. So sometimes a visual prompt like the class photo seen here, can serve as a reminder, just a little visual cue for ourselves of who we are creating a lesson for and the types of supports and scaffolding that we will need to include in this space.
So building on this notion, station activities allow for various groupings, for student to student, student to teacher, as well as independent learning. And so we took this opportunity to model for you an alternative way of representing yourself in your Bitmoji classroom. And so here we used the Unscreen website to remove the background of these videos. Again, this is another illustration of how to address issues of equity for those students who may have limited Wi-Fi access or use of devices.
And again, that's something that you can work with the student to create that if need be. Here we're back with Mrs. Park again, and she's using that same unscreen website that you just saw us using in the prior slide. And she is here sharing a welcome message and an agenda slide from her Bitmoji classroom that prepares students for the expectations and the learning for the day. So with this Bitmoji slide, students can open it to get an overview of the day or of any previous days that they may have missed or that they wish to revisit. This is sometimes easier than trying to scroll and sift through the classwork page on a learning management system or digital platform such as Google Classroom. So it just, really, it helps anchor the students and can sometimes be more accessible. So Bitmoji Classroom offers a more visual way to organize information. And as you can see, students are supported in this slide from Mrs. Park in 2 languages. You may notice that the Do Now activity is directly targeted at inviting students to interact in the virtual classroom. And similarly, the agenda refers to follow-up activities, creating opportunities for student to student, small group, and student to teacher engagement. I also like how Mrs. Park includes a bonus for students turning on their camera. It is not mandatory, but she encourages it as a way to foster community and connection between the face-to-face and virtual learning environments. So, I mean, just a beautiful slide and a great example of creating those opportunities, meaningful opportunities for interaction.
Right. And so here we have just a simple language and interaction support. And it also promotes self-advocacy because, students are clearly communicating their needs and their progress during a lesson or task completion. And so we have another poll that Kelley is going to launch in just a second. And we're just looking for some of other resources, tools, or activities that we can incorporate into our Bitmoji classroom to encourage the various types of classroom interaction, whether it be student to student, small group, student to teacher. So again, we're going to ask you to, respond in the chat for this one. Or again, feel free to unmute yourself because we would love to hear from you.
And I'm just going to add to that, we talked about student to student, small group, student to teacher interactions, but think also about teacher to teacher interactions. How, if you're in a co-taught setting, even in a virtual space, how this might create opportunities for teacher to teacher interactions, for that, visual representation of the 2 educators supporting the learning going on in a room. So think about that as you're responding to. We'll give you a few more minutes. I'm just going to close the poll so I could take a look at the chat.
So I'm looking in the chat, Kelley, and I just see someone mentioning putting some of their personal likes around the classroom, and that just promotes, conversation starters. And so students might share a like with you, and it might allow you to develop a closer relationship with your students. So I think that is, a good place to start. All right, so there's not too much coming into the chat at this point, but feel free to continue to add as we go on, should new ideas pop up.
I see them, Laura also mentioned Jamboard, which is a great way to foster interaction, that you can include that in your Bitmoji classroom as well.
Yes, and using reactions for student responses. I'm not sure if you're referring to the reactions here on Zoom, but yeah, that definitely is one way to gauge your students. All right.
So for those of you who may be using Google Classroom, we wanted to just model for you how you can create a banner of your Bitmoji classroom to really visually integrate the different platforms that you may be using for instruction to support your students. So again, tying these things in so students have those visual connections, and really then layering the features of all of these different platforms to best support your students and the instruction that's happening, whether face-to-face or virtually.
Right. And we want to remind you that Bitmoji classrooms are not replacements for Google Classroom, but rather just a meaningful supplement. So all of the assignments are posted in Google Classroom, or whatever learning platform you are using in your district. And then the Bitmoji Classroom is a separate posting that can be incorporated into your existing learning management system.
So again, much of the content that we shared with you today came from, in particular, these 3 resources that we have highlighted here on the left, which provide a great starting point for creating a meaningful Bitmoji classroom. These, along with many other things that we explored while creating today's presentation, are included in the resource document that we referred to earlier, and that's pictured on the right side of your screen. And I am actually going to now share the link to that document in the chat, so get ready to copy and paste it. Here it comes. The anticipation is killing you. I know.
Oh, it is. I'm so excited.
I know.
Once you do get that, you're going to see that it's going to take you to this Google Drive, and you'll have this document there. Everything is hyperlinked. So you click on one of the images and it'll take you to a document. We are asking that you make a copy of each of those documents in order to be able to edit them. So you'll have, some blank templates that you can build your own classrooms, or you can borrow some of the Esther Park ones that are already partially created, and then, mold them to the needs of your needs and that of your students. And again, if you're new to all of this, we do have those how-to videos also to help support you as you create your Bitmoji classroom. And so that leads us to our follow-up Friday. So during the spring, the Long Island R.B.ERN, we hosted follow-up Friday webinars, and they were really used to celebrate what was happening in the classrooms across Long Island, and the teachers who were rising to meet the challenge of supporting our English language learners in digital spaces. With that being said, if you have already created a Bitmoji classroom, or if you plan to create one after today's session, we would love to extend an invitation for you to share what you're doing during our follow-up Friday session on October 23rd. So if you would like to share what you're doing, please email us. Our emails are at the bottom of the screen for more information on how you can do so. And we hope that you are as excited about it as we are here.
Yes, we just can't contain our excitement. And again, if you're a little hesitant or shy about sharing, it doesn't have to be very long. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, anything, just to highlight and, really share your accomplishments in what you're doing, the innovative ways that you are supporting your English learners. And again, just to help us build each other's capacity. Sometimes we learn best from our peers in the field. So we hope that you'll be interested in contributing and joining us during that session. So right now we just have a few moments left. If anyone has any questions or comments that they would like to share at this point.
So
Again,
question
you can
in
either
the
unmute
chat.
yourself. Yeah.
And someone asked, how do you get the Bitmojis to move? So again, that was used, we did that using the Snapchat app. So we went into Snapchat, we combined our Bitmoji account to our Snapchat account, and then you can get the dancing Bitmojis. You download it to your phone, then you have to use the Unscreen website, which is free, to remove the background, to then be able to integrate those moving Bitmojis into your slides.
And I will just add that Erica is much more of a digital native than I am. I'm a year or 20 or 30 older and would consider myself digitally challenged in many respects. But I mean, we really learn so much from each other and learn so much in creating these sessions. We hope that maybe we've shared some of that and that you're walking away with something you've learned today. But if I can do it, you can too. And it really, really pushes you to try new things, incorporate these great tools and resources that your kids will run with, your students will run with these. We've seen just such a great response to them. So we hope that you found something meaningful today too, that you can take away with you.
Okay,
Just gonna-
so we use the Unscreen website, but again, that website is listed in that document that Kelley just shared in the chat. So all of the websites, every single thing that we use to create today's presentation is listed in that document.
Mhm.
All right, so if there are no more questions.
So before we go, we also want to share with you a link to our new evaluation protocol. Earlier, we had asked you to enter your first name, last name, position, and district in the chat to verify attendance. But now I'm going to be sharing a link to a Google Doc for an evaluation form for today's session. And we ask that you please just respond honestly, because this is how we improve our sessions and identify topics for future sessions, and really try to address what your needs are, not just topics that we want to talk about, but identifying topics that you want to learn more about. So please take some time to complete that Google form evaluation that I just shared the link to.
Excuse me, I came in late because I was teaching. I just wanted to know if I could still give you my name. I
You
was
can-
online with students.
And you can enter it in the chat right now. So if you
Oh,
go
okay,
into,
thank you. And
You're
thank you,
welcome.
ladies.
Thank you. Thank you for
Welcome.
being here. We're glad you were able to join us.
Okay, so again, we would like to end with this message.
We want to thank you all for participating. And we hope that you found it helpful.
Thank you for being here with us today. We hope to see you on October 23rd. Be well.